is now 6 o'clock. I would like to call the meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Condon?
Present.
Dr. Page?
Present.
Tom Lennon?
Okay, so please note, community members, Bill Bishop, I'm sorry.
Cindy Clark.
Cindy Clark. Your address?
34 Kathy Lane, Southbridge, Mass.
And Brent Abrahamson, community members attending the meeting.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'd like to inform you that I will be videotaping tonight's meeting.
So noted, thank you. Okay, so first item is approval of the, approval of the minutes from the May 4th, 2015 Budget Finance Subcommittee meeting.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Calm delay now. All right, so we have several items that I think some may require a little bit more attention than others. I tentatively put together a time schedule to try and keep us on time.
Much appreciated.
So, the FY16 budget proposal, 20 minutes. Item 4A, update from the acting superintendent regarding feedback from the community and town council education and human services subcommittee held on May 22nd regarding the school department budget discussion and any potential recommendations to the school committee.
Sure. I think that maybe A and B are actually something that we can talk about together, because my recommendation coming out of EHS would be.
Right, and the town, in between, we didn't realize at the time
Right.
that the town was going to vote the budget for the schools in between.
Correct.
So, yeah, so we can probably combine those two.
So, in speaking to both A and B together, I would recommend that a meeting of the whole be held, so that we can review the entire committee's goals and make some appropriate decisions about how to move forward to close the gap of approximately $460,000. We round that up to $500,000 in the budget process. So we have some preliminary things that we'd like to consider doing for the district. From our perspective, we would like to minimize impact in classrooms, so minimize the impact to instruction in front of students. So looking at ways to minimize that. Also looking at ways to minimize the impact to teaching staff.
Okay.
So those are some of our goals in moving forward, but I do know that the school committee has goals around improvement in student achievement, improvement in special education and ELS subgroups. So I think it's going to be a fine line that we walk together to try and close the gap, because it's significant.
Right, right.
So all of the things that we had in the budget regarding growth, additional interventionists, special education staff at Eastford Grove School, none of those things can be moved forward in a budget where we're basically cutting $460,000 out of what we would need to start the next
So
school year as we did this year.
Okay, so just to make sure that we're clear, so you're talking about we're having to cut $460K from not a level services budget, but from levels, what would be the level services projected? Okay.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, I believe it's about $100,000 over where we were this year.
A couple $100,000, 200.
Okay. So, do you have specific recommendations as to programs that you think we can potentially put off? I mean, I don't want to use the word cut. I'd like
Yeah.
more or less you use the word defer.
Yeah, defer,
if
sure.
possible.
You know, we are so heavy personnel that when you look at $500,000, personnel really is where we need to look. We have some ideas around attrition and retirement. And in fact, asking if there are people interested in retirement in order to move in that direction and lower some of our overall salary. In terms of programming, we're very lean already. I know that the alternative school was a goal to get to, but in a budget like this, that would have to be something that we look at, whether or not we move that to grant funding and restructure that even more. is an option for us. Programs, things like professional development would be significantly impacted to reduce impact in the classroom. Then we would also be looking at, as we've talked about unfortunately before, curriculum. So curriculum committees, curriculum writing, and the resourcing that goes along with curriculum review and recommendations is something that we would be looking towards as well.
Okay. So,
We did move some things to capital. So if capital doesn't come through, then there are some things like Google Chromebooks in the general that don't make sense to move if we don't have the ability to have the network infrastructure to support the
Right.
devices.
Right.
So a little bit of the budget depends on capital and what happens at capital.
So, are there, my recollection is one of the main things that required the Google Chromebooks was the move to a different testing evaluation system. Is there a mandated timeline with which we need to do that, or is it?
So we're adopting our.
Can we buy a year?
Well, we're kind of hoping we can buy a year. That's a DESI decision when they're going to go from MCAS to PARC.
Yeah.
We haven't heard a final on that at this point. But our internal assessment system, as we shift from ANET to MAP testing, we are looking to be able to do that 100% online. We can do that with the infrastructure we have right now,
Okay.
but it would be much more efficient, and it would also prepare the children for PARC if we were able to implement the Chromebooks and having them take online assessments 3 times a year to get them used to the tools that they can use, like highlighters on the computer, things like that.
Okay. So realistically speaking, that's something that's probably going to be deferred, is the infrastructure associated with that.
If,
And
you know,
if we want to
yep.
preserve as much
Yep.
instructional capacity as we can.
Mhm.
Okay. Would that be your recommendation to the school committee to, maybe it doesn't have to be decided now, but to recommend to defer the infrastructure upgrades in view of preserving?
Well, the infrastructure is a capital, so if the
Okay.
infrastructure capital does not materialize,
Right.
then the budget line item for Chromebooks, we won't fund in the general budget.
And the Chrome, I forget the number for that, for the Chromebooks.
There is about 30,000 set aside for the budget. We planned for that. I believe I want to say it's 120 total.
Including the capital improvements?
It's in addition to the capital, yeah. Yeah.
So there's 120 total, which includes the capital, or?
I think it includes the capital, yes.
Includes the capital,
So somewhere in there we built, but we've got a few on both sides, I believe.
Okay.
But total network upgrades, if I may, was 300,000.
Yes, the network upgrade is, and that's just a very broad projection based on my experience and speaking with some IT companies. And that really, there are some levels we can do it at. We could have someone come in, write the specs, and then we could stick our own people up in the ceilings pulling wire and things like that. We can pay full boat for someone to do it soup to nuts for us. There are other systems we can integrate. The phone system, voice over IP, is a fabulous system. It's got a lot of long-term cost savings associated with it. If we had the funding to be able to commingle that, camera systems in the elementary school, security systems that would all be networked, could all be part of that system. So there's different flavors and levels we could go with within that structure. We'd have to get pricing and bids on that. But I think the amount that we've put in is very reasonable. We presume we can do that.
Okay. So I'm thinking, so we're looking at $300,000 that was set aside in the current budget proposal, or in the.
It's in the capital request,
The
so
capital
it's
request.
separate. There's the operating budget, which is what we've gone through with the town
Right.
already. The
Yeah.
capital budget request is next week.
Okay.
Their meeting right now.
So we don't know yet how that's,
We don't.
so let's not
Correct.
even discuss
Yeah.
it.
Right, so, but what it means to us is that if capital doesn't go through, then we would be removing the request for the Chromebooks. Because
Okay.
it doesn't make sense to have students on Chromebooks that
Yeah.
can't hit the internet
Right,
and
yeah.
then they're meaningless.
Okay. So we're looking at a potential 120K of savings just in not doing that.
No,
And
30,
so-
30K.
30.
So only
general.
30,
Yeah.
okay, so,
Yeah.
yeah, I got it. Okay.
120 units.
So that's really not significant.
No, but it's about what the town gave us in their extra
Right.
funding in the budget. Every little cent counts.
Just for a point of clarification, just to kind of walk through it.
Mhm.
So, just because I was running some of the numbers.
Mhm.
So our budget from 2015 budget
Mhm.
was 25,232.45.
Yes.
Our projected original 2016 budget was 25,718.305. But the town is giving us 25,574.689, which is 143,616, plus our projected unemployment costs, which average would be 153,473, which would bring the total to 297,89. So what are the other projected numbers that we're getting at to our $460,000 deficit?
Okay,
What am I missing?
Okay, so as we, can I have this, I'm sorry. So, the initial, actually, the 460 is based on, the initial 460 is based on their initial number of 25,537. So they narrowed that gap by putting the 36,000 in a little bit. So there is, give me a second. The level service budget was estimated to be 25,898, 407.
So we
That
must
was
have
our
added
level
that from
service.
the initial,
So that comes to, from the initial, that comes to a gap of 365,87. Now, the town has given us unemployment. So included within our budget is our unemployment. Our fiscal year 14 total for unemployment was 300,000.
right,
This year, we're projecting 153,473. If we have to have staffing cuts based on a budget that's effectively 0.8%, or if people leave because we can't offer programs or things like that, our unemployment's possibly going to be higher. So I mean, 153 is a nice number, but historically it's been higher. I'm not going to project we're at 153 next year necessarily. I'd rather budget conservatively for that, given that 14 was 300,000.
right.
So I figure for 200,000. I'd like to manage to 200,000. So that expands that deficit
So this is
to
wrong.
560. No, this is absolutely correct.
This is current.
This is what we're projecting for 2015, this current year.
So this year,
This
so
year.
this
This
isn't
current
projected
year.
for next
That's not
year?
projected for next year.
Okay,
And when you forecast things, you want to smooth over time. The best predictor of future performance is past performance. I have to look at this and I have to say, in fiscal year 14, we spent 300,000. In fiscal year 15, we're going to be lower. That would be great. It would be great if fiscal year 16 we were lower still. But if we have to make programmatic cuts based on a $300,000 shortfall, say, we might lose staff one way or the other. So I'm not going to predict for the low end. I'm going to predict for something that I think is reasonable. And at this point, it's a guessing game. You really got to play a guessing game and do your best. So
so the projection is not for next year, this projection
No,
is for
just-
the end of this
yeah,
fiscal
this
year?
year.
So,
Okay,
yeah, so to get to that
that's what I wanted to
460,
clarify.
adding 200 to that $360,000
sense.
gap brings it to 560. Now, the town has told us that based on some sort of analysis by a solar company, that if we were to put solar collectors on the roof of the middle high school, we might receive somewhere around $100,000 in savings. Those solar panels are not up right now. That doesn't predict for whether the weather is going to be cloudy or sunny. It doesn't project for whether an ice storm takes them out or not. I don't, it's all well and good, and I'm hopeful that we will achieve 100,000, but, you know, they tell me to bet the bank on it, so I'm putting $100,000 back in savings, so that brings that 560 down to 460.
All right, so
Again.
and this is something where the capital's been paid for, it's been done,
Yeah.
and this will be saved?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're actually anticipating that $100,000 savings?
I am, but I have no, no basis,
guarantee that it's
other than the
gonna
town
happen.
telling me that we're gonna get it.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right. Well, that's important.
yep.
So Jill, to your point, I think it is important to point out that we have moved unemployment from fiscal year 2014 at 300,853 and to the fiscal year 2015 with a projection. Currently, we're at 127,894 with the projection on that out to be approximately 153,473. So I think the idea that's out there that we're not attending to unemployment, I think is a problematic one, and certainly one that we have been talking about all along, that we are cognizant of it. There are things that we're doing to limit that, and I think we're making progress there in reducing that.
Okay, so what are we doing to limit the unemployment?
So for me, unemployment and legal come under the same umbrella.
Yeah,
What we're doing for both is making a concerted effort to work with the union as we work with staff to either improve performance or address concerns. So we've been meeting weekly with the union and we go over issues and concerns that maybe can be solved at the building level with just a conversation. But also working and collaborating with the union as we work through progressive discipline with staff. So we are able to use progressive discipline in conjunction with supports like professional development for staff, so that we are limiting wrongful terminations or dismissals, or knee-jerk, I guess, dismissals. If we have an issue where there's a safety concern, we have been able to work through those issues and not encounter legal costs associated with that. I think it's important for us to go back to the beginning of the year and talk about progressive discipline. We trained all of the administrators on progressive discipline. It has been a problem that the district has not used progressive discipline throughout its history. I think that there's some surprise on the part of staff when it's used. For example, letters of expectation are given to staff, they're surprised by that. So we're working with staff to help them understand that, you know, progressive discipline is about setting expectation. And so as we work through and have trained all of our administrators and work with every instance with our administrators on, you know, have you given a letter of expectation? Have you given a written confirmation of a verbal reprimand? Have you used a written reprimand? Before we ever get to the place where we may be looking at significant discipline in terms of a suspension or even a dismissal. I think working through that process with staff to see that we are trying to support a change in behavior, a change in practice, first and foremost, I think is very important. And as I said, either myself or Bill work with every principal when there's a disciplinary action that we're looking at, so that we make sure that everybody's on the same page with that. We have also been working with counsel to make sure that when we're documenting our cases, that they are strong cases and that they're fair.
Okay. So I guess my question is, are you doing anything that is different from what's contractually obligated by the unions? Because I mean, my understanding is the way the union contract works is there's a certain mechanism that has to be done in terms of how evaluations are done, how you issue
Yep.
a discipline, and and so forth. And so,
I think in a word, what we're trying to be is very transparent, so that there's no surprise. So that if we're working with staff through progressive discipline, there's no surprise at the end if there's a decision that there may be disciplinary action warranted.
okay. Now, has that been a major issue over the year?
This year, no, I think it comes as a surprise to staff that we issue letters of expectation, that it's a culture that we're trying to build. I think in the past, if I can speak to the history, even though I haven't been here for it, there seems to be behaviors that weren't addressed.
Okay.
And that now there's a surprise that we're addressing that.
All right, so the overall net benefit of this new, sort of, is it a new policy or is it a new?
It's just a new approach, I think. I think it's implementing fully the teacher evaluation system and also implementing fully progressive discipline.
Okay. And can you quantify how that's impacted the budget this year or impacted spending this year? Is there a way to sort of, because this is budget finance subcommittee, so.
Yep. I think
I
what
don't
I would
get
have
much
to
into
do,
other-
yeah, I think what I would have to do is go back and look at how discipline was carried out last year and the result of us facing litigation and then bringing staff back because progressive discipline wasn't followed, and we've lost litigation, versus our work this year and the types of litigation that have come forward, and whether or not we're losing those cases. So I would have to spend some time doing, the analysis of that.
I would imagine, we're coming towards the end of the year, you probably should know, I mean, how many cases
I-
have there
I-
been, how many have we lost?
Well, I
this
just
year?
don't want to say that
Okay,
right now without exactly having,
okay.
the exact numbers in front of me and the exact cases.
So maybe for an action item for the next meeting is to have a review of the impact of the newly sort of, what's the word? Ramped up implementation or actual implementation of the progressive discipline program and the impact that it's had on the unemployment costs and sort of legal costs. I
Yeah.
think that would be a good metric to kind of,
Yeah.
to gauge
Mhm.
if that's effective.
All right, so so in item B, we had discussion strategy to prioritize the budget development for future years to accommodate the projected shortfalls. And so, so we're looking at probably deferring Chromebooks, most likely,
Mhm.
right? We're thinking, depending on the capital budget
Yeah.
and whatnot. And so even if the capital budget came through, what would your recommendation be on the campus? Would you still go
Then I
forward
would-
with it?
yeah, then I would try to go forward with
Still
them,
go forward
yeah.
with $37,000 or
Yeah.
whatever? Okay.
Yeah.
I think that probably makes sense.
I
Just
think,
get a jump start on
Yeah.
implementing the new evaluation.
Sure.
Stuff. Okay. All right, so the next item now is item C, which is update from the acting superintendent regarding the potential financial impact of the proposed central office SMHS reorganization proposal, particular attention paid to salary estimates for restructured position with adjusted job descriptions, blah, blah.
mhm.
Discussion regarding recommendation of the school committee.
Sure. So, the salary estimates I talked about at EHS, although I'm not sure that it was heard, it's in the packets that I was providing everyone at the hearing. It's under the tab of E. So,
Because it wasn't in, I didn't see specific salaries for specific jobs, it was just kind of like
yeah,
an overall.
Is that page 5 that you're looking at?
yes, yeah.
Yeah, so there was budget impacts and it just listed the
Sure.
positions with totals, it didn't say anything about what the new numbers would be for the new positions and so forth.
Sure. So, the ranges, I guess, to answer your question, because those are all contractual and are upon successful negotiation of individual contracts with people, there is a salary range, which is actually your last page. And so I think before we got into the specifics of what salary ranges would be for each of the positions, the principal salary surveys, you can see the salaries range from, depending on the size of the school, the number of students, the experience of the principal, they range from 93,000 to 105,000 for a high school. And then for the middle school, they range from 99 to 103. So we would have to have a discussion of what that range would be appropriate. I would suggest that the appropriate range for those salaries would be under 100 for each of those positions
So
as
high school
building
and
principal.
middle school,
Mhm,
you're saying under 100,000?
right, okay.
So
And
let me
then-
let me just look through here.
Then there's also the assistant principal salaries.
Okay, high school, middle school.
And with the change, or the proposed change, there really isn't a change with the exception of the .5 VP at the high school with the additional .5 athletic director. We're not seeing much of a change in salary to those line items. The net amount of students that they would be over would be
So-
about the same.
Okay, so the high school AD position is .5 AD
Correct.
and 0.5 principal, assistant principal.
VP, yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so what's the salary for that one?
So we didn't see a change in that from the current salary structure for assistant principals. As you can see, when we did the analysis of the assistant principal survey, it's right in line with our current salary. So there's a range from the low end, year one, Grafton at 84,500 to a high of Leicester, which is 94,000. So we're within that range in the current contract for folks, and there's not a lot of change in,
So what number would you,
Job
I mean, we
description.
need, so we're gonna need to vote a line item budget for the school committee, and which has to include exactly what the budget is for exact line items. So what would be the line item you would include in that position?
so again, it would be, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're currently 90,
Assistant principals, 82.5.
82.5. So I would say not over 85.
So about $85,000.
Yeah. And again, these are all contracts that would be newly negotiated, so.
Right, so the point is that you're basing the numbers off of an existing job, but you're changing the job.
Really only one.
Well, you're changing the athletic director,
Just
assistant
the one,
principal
yep.
job. But you're hoping to be able to recruit somebody who's, wants to be an assistant principal,
Correct.
has 3 years of experience as an assistant principal, and also has AD certification,
Correct.
and you're gonna propose a budget of $85,000. Half of that time is gonna be spent being an AD. And so you're talking about $42,500 for the person to be an AD. What's the current stipend for the AD?
But it's a little tricky to figure because it's $10,000 stipend, but a reduced teaching load.
Okay, so 10K stipend, is it, I thought I read 5 somewhere in the new contract.
No, it's 10
Or
this
no,
year.
8, I thought it was 8.
It's 8 in the new contract. It was a non-negotiated stipend last year.
Okay, but the new contract is 8. So that would be $8,000 plus what's the reduced teaching load?
It's a 2-class teaching load.
It's less than half. Typical is 5 classes.
Okay.
So 2
So you're
kids.
looking at 2/5 of,
60 divided by 5 is
so you're
12.
looking at
So
$5,000?
you're talking at 36,000 on top of that.
8,000 plus 36?
36, yeah.
36, so that's
Darn close, 44.
44,000. Now, is the current person that's an AD at a $60,000 salary?
That's a
That's a
ballpark, I
personnel.
don't know her
I'd
salary.
really like to not
offhand.
discuss that in public.
Well, I understand that, but I'm just trying to get an idea around the economics of the decision, because one of the things that I'm concerned about from a programmatic standpoint is one of the things that was mentioned in the restructuring
Yep.
proposal was discipline, culture and climate, blah, blah,
Yep.
all this kind of stuff.
Yep.
And it seems to me that that warrants an assistant principal position to really get a hold of that kind of stuff. And so
Mhm.
why would you want to saddle that position with athletic director
Well,
responsibilities?
It's a good question, and one of the reasons that we made that decision was because an assistant principal who will be serving in the AD role will also know the student athletes.
Okay.
And that's a lever, I think, to help students understand how their discipline record in school affects their ability to play sports, to participate in sports, and that, you know, students who are going to see an athletic director out on the field on a regular basis, be talking to them about their bus behavior, all of those kinds of things. I think it's a strong tandem role for kids to see a VP who's also there supporting their athletics as well. It's, you know, it's a program decision that is not unique, should it be made here in Southbridge. It's not unique. There are several towns in the surrounding area that do have or are moving toward principals, vice principals that serve also as athletic directors.
What towns?
Belchertown is one. I'd have to go back to my list.
Around here?
Belchertown is the closest one. Honestly, I've forgotten at this point.
And so I guess, you know, some of this may be a little bit off topic in terms of budget. Well, it is kind of budget related in the sense that, how do you know you're going to be able to recruit an AP that has AD requirements?
Well, when
Yeah,
you,
sure.
yeah,
Okay.
when you look at the surrounding postings and you look at other towns who are doing similar work, I think it's a need that people are going to recognize.
Okay.
You know, if we get to the point where we can't find a qualified candidate, then we'll have to reconsider. But at this point, that's a position that we would like to move forward with.
Yeah.
Thank you, if I may, through you. My question is, and correct me if I'm wrong, under the current job descriptions, let's say high school principal, take for instance, in what kind of salary range we're working in, we want somebody that has 3 years or more successful instructional leadership experience. But looking at the other towns, 3 years or more would be, let's say, North Brookfield's year 3 principal is like 98,450. Year 3 in Millbury is 110. Year 2 in Webster is 118, which is more than we're actually saying for our salary. Same thing with principal for a middle school of, let's say, year 3 at Leicester, 94,800. Year 3 Spencer East Brookfield, 96,500, and year 3 in Webster, which is a very comparable district to our own, that's $111,670. So I just don't know what kind of qualified candidate we'd get to kind of match the job description according to these salary surveys of the surrounding districts. So I don't know how you can answer that.
I want to be careful about confusing 3 years of instructional leadership experience with principal experience. So we would consider someone who had a turnaround experience, let's say had a turnaround as an assistant principal and had leadership experience, but not at the principal level. There are training programs through DESE that are specific to turnaround leadership. So I don't want to confuse 3 years with 3 years at principal. So I think that's where we gain a little flexibility in the salary and what we're looking for.
So you wouldn't be looking necessarily for experienced principals or assistant principals?
Correct.
That's what you're saying?
Right, so for example, someone who maybe was an instructional coach, doing turnaround work, someone who had, again, gone through turnaround experience, that's the kind of person that we would be looking for.
Does that need to be qualified in the job description then so that people know whether or not they qualify to apply?
Typically, if a person or a candidate has a question, they can call. So I know Katie does field quite a few calls about, gee, am I qualified for that position or not? I also think it's a position where we need to actively go out and recruit some qualified candidates for positions specific to turnaround work. And that goes also to the IRS positions as well. That's not just the leadership positions or the principal, assistant principal positions. It's throughout the instructional program.
So a big concern of mine is meeting the timeline
Mm-hmm.
with all of this. And in particular, I want to stay focused on budget. We've got budgetary constraints, they're big. We all know they're big. That's the big elephant in the room, is the fact that we've got a limited budget in order to provide services to these students.
Mm-hmm.
Yet at the same time, we're proposing to overhaul the administration.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest with you, I'm very concerned about the risks
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, have you thought about, what if you can't recruit a high school, middle school principal that can do this and within the budget numbers you're proposing?
Mm-hmm.
To come to a district that has had a history of, what is it now? There has not been in the last 3 years a principal that's completed a year yet. And we're looking at one now, according to your new proposal, who will not probably complete a year, or maybe barely complete a year. And then to come to a place that has a history of just going, no. So I'd like to just get a little bit of your perspective on how you think that's going to impact your recruiting capability in terms of budget. If you're going to say, okay, we're going to give you the same amount of money as the low end of what our competition is, how are you going to convince somebody to come here?
Well, I think the answer to that, honestly, first of all, everybody who is in the administration is able to reapply. So I want to make that statement very clear.
Okay.
Second,
And so, then a quick follow-up with that. Those job descriptions seem to be written such that they can't reapply. The bar is higher than the current, so it says 3 years of leadership experience for a principal job. None of them have it, or the one doesn't have it. The middle school job says 3 years of experience at the middle school level. I don't know anybody in the district that could step up that has 3 years of experience in the middle school level of leadership experience.
well, with all due respect.
Unless
Yep.
there's
Yep.
someone,
There
you know what I
are.
mean?
Yep.
And so, and especially assistant principals, I think it's my question for that, when I read through it, I was like, I view assistant principal jobs as kind of a stepping stone. And so people are usually looking at moving up within a district, or maybe taking an AP job outside a district, probably logging 3 years, getting the experience certifications, all that kind of stuff to become a principal somewhere. So the notion of recruiting an assistant principal to come to Southbridge that has 3 years of assistant principal experience for a lateral move, that, I'm like,
Right.
ugh.
So I think one of the things that we are doing often in Southbridge is looking at Southbridge from a deficit model. There is a reason to come to the Southbridge Public Schools. The reason to come to the Southbridge Public Schools is because we are a turnaround district, and we are going to turn around, and there are people who want to do turnaround work. It's specific in the training that they receive. It's specific in the experiences that they go and search out. And
Okay.
it isn't all the time about the money. It's about making sure that we have a Southbridge Public Schools that has the systems in place, and we have people who know how to turn the district in the direction that it needs to go in. Those people exist, and I believe that we can find them. There are people who have come to this district who have turnaround in their resume. They have turnaround in their blood. It's what they want to do. They want to make sure that every child, every day, has the quality education that they deserve.
Okay.
And those people are there.
Okay, so is that, so that you just gave us a really compelling argument with it, you want someone with a turnaround mindset. So that's not even in the job description, or is it? Did I miss it? That's what you're seeking?
It'll be in the description that goes up on School Spring. It'll also be in the conversations that we have with DESE around finding the people who are in turnaround programs. It's the networking that we will do with the research folks who have produced the turnaround results, research over the last 4 years. There are people in urban districts in Worcester and Holyoke and Boston who have been participating for a decade in this work. And I think those are the connections we need to make for Southbridge, because we cannot continue to do the same and expect a different outcome.
So this is a completely different job description than we're gonna put on School Spring?
No, what will be in the front of School Spring, in the description of the Southbridge Public Schools to attract turnaround work, people who are interested in that work, is a description of the Southbridge Public Schools that defines that.
All right, so let's move on, because I think we're getting off schedule. All right, so do you have sort of upper limit salary estimates that are going to go into the budget for each of these positions? That's something I think it's important to nail down.
Okay, I will.
Because we
Yeah.
need to vote on a line item budget pretty soon. And we're not going to be able to deviate from that very easily.
I just have one.
Yeah.
Just on that particular item, it just concerns me that the salaries are so much lower than the surrounding districts for these positions, especially because we are a turnaround school district. I just think that it's gonna end up being a budget nightmare because they're so low, especially in regards to the other positions too, like if someone has a master's degree, in their step levels. I just think we're way under budgeting right now in the compare and contrast of that. And that, to me personally, is a concern that we're going to end up way over budget in that particular SMHS regarding budget prep. And unless I can see other numbers
Sure.
within, I guess, a day, then that is a huge concern for me.
So I guess the numbers that I would like to get is, what is, like, in your proposed budget for the high school principal, what's the number going to be?
Sure.
I heard 98 something, I heard under 100 earlier, I don't know what the number is though.
So I assume you want the middle school as well?
Yeah, I want all, yeah, I'd like all of them if I can.
And all the repeat?
Yep,
Okay. I don't have it here, so
okay.
I don't know if that's, which again, I think is one of the reasons I suggested as we opened that a meeting of the whole would be the
Yeah.
venue to.
Yeah, but I think these numbers need to be nailed down prior to actually executing this proposal, because it's got budgetary impact, it's got fiscal impact, it has risk associated with it. So I think that, we need to be fiduciarily responsible to this district in terms of how we proceed with these things and have a really good understanding of exactly what the monetary impact is likely to be. And also so we can, as a governing body, when we go to the full committee, to make recommendations as to, you know, how to mitigate the risk. What's the risk of being able to do this? I mean, you know, if you have $98,000 for a high school principal to spend, and you go out and you got this, you know, you might not find somebody that's gonna do it, then what do we do? You know, and so those are management decisions we need to make, or we need to be able to weigh in on it. So, I think really we need a complete, salary schedule, not ranges. I mean, ranges are fine, but we need to have what the upper limit is gonna be in the line item budget for next year for every single impacted position in the restructuring proposal. So we can understand what the impact is. And that includes probably, in the other area that I wanted to touch upon in that, and maybe it's not as much budget, but we can discuss it because it does have financial impact, is the other effect, like the ISS supervisor positions. We're eliminating certain positions and then we're adding them as certified teaching positions. Has the union weighed in on that? Is that, because
Well,
now you're gonna take somebody who's in the union,
They're not in,
they won't.
they're not in.
But so there'll be a certified teacher that could be in a union someplace. But then they'll be in a non-union position.
No, they'll be in a union position. If they're certified staff, then they will be in a union,
Which union?
the SEA. So they're
Okay,
licensed.
so there'll be a certified licensed teacher that will be in the SEA, but their job will be decidedly different from a classroom teacher.
Mhm.
So my question is the union okay with that? Because if I was, I'm just telling you, I looked at that and I was like, if I was, say, a chemistry teacher or a physics teacher that has a lot of responsibility, preps and all of this kind of stuff, and I say, well, you're gonna hire a guy the same as me for the same amount of money that has to do no preps, no nothing, and is just gonna go into ISS and do whatever.
So,
And so,
Yep.
I don't know, I mean, I'm just
Yep.
asking the question is whether or not this is gonna provoke an issue. And the other issue that sort of double, sort of
Yep.
A and B parts to the question, is that my understanding of how ISS operates is that it's pretty much all day long, probably a minimal break for lunch. It's probably not the standard contractual 5 periods of teaching and then 1 prep, 1 duty and whatever, and then a certain defined workday. And my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, but those positions do probably more throughout the day in terms of, you know, they don't have those free periods, and they probably also don't have the obligation to stay and monitor after-school detentions or whatever they are and so forth. So that's my major sort of
Sure.
programmatic
Yep.
question
Yep,
on
yep,
that
yep.
end.
So I think the positions need to have some flexibility for the principal to develop them as they see fit. In to a certain degree, ISS, as I understand it being run now, the teachers are not in the ISS room 24/7. So they are actually using day-to-day subs to cover ISS classrooms so that the ISS folks have the flexibility to go out and work.
We'll have lunch or something.
Right,
Yeah.
so I think
So-
to that end, I don't think there'd be much of a change in terms of covering preps. To your point about actually prepping for students, I think what we're seeing is the need to change what ISS is. That if we're gonna discipline a student, then putting them in ISS for a period is not working. Because now they're just trying to misbehave to get out of a class that they don't like, so it's more of an incentive. So we're trying to devalue the incentive to misbehave so that you can go hang out in ISS. And that's no disrespect to the ISS teachers at all whatsoever. I think it's just the nature of what we've created. In terms of all-day ISS, we do need to look at curriculum. We are not seeing a reduction in disciplinary actions that we're needing to take because we don't have places where kids are going, where teachers are receiving them and going through a curriculum, going through a de-escalation strategy, going through all of that in a very formal way. I do believe that the teachers would be prepping to support students in both behavioral strategy development, but also in their curriculum areas. They would be collaborating with teachers, certainly at the high school and teams at the middle school. In the best run programs, these are teachers who go out and actually help support the kids in classrooms first, so they're not coming out to ISS all day. In the best run programs, they are in providing support in inclusion ways, and also, particularly at the middle school, meeting with the teams to talk about what the strategies to use with specific students are.
Okay, so I guess my question is, I mean, that makes perfect sense, but, I mean, so do you have some sort of, is there tangible evidence, or do you have tangible kind of documents from other places, or something to show that works? And so why not try and implement that here? Why do you, I guess I don't know why you need to have something different than what we have now in order to accomplish the
Sure.
objective that you just
So,
described.
yeah, so one of the things that we talked about, the principal and I, as we left the Worcester program, was the fact that the principal there was adamant that the licensed teacher for what we call ISS was a critical part of changing the discipline culture in the school. And that position was charged very differently with tasks associated, as I just described, with taking ISS from a place where students supposedly go for the day to serve a punishment for misbehavior, to a much more strategic approach to wrapping services around students so that we're preventing discipline from occurring in the first place. The Worcester High School principal, and I forget the name of the school now, but she was adamant that that was strategic on their part and significantly improved the discipline climate at the school.
Okay. So basically, the ISS teacher would be going to classrooms,
Yeah, that's the goal.
intervening.
Mhm.
What happens if they have somebody in ISS and they need someone else they want to go?
Well,
How
it's
do
the
you
same
do
thing
it?
now, they're using building-based subs to cover that. So I would assume it would be a similar type of approach. But I think as the program develops, you talk about where the budget cuts are gonna happen, that's a place where it's gonna be felt, because what you really want is either an EA or a tutor type of position to be able to stay and develop relationships with the kids and be there full-time so that the teacher does have the flexibility. But moving forward for next year anyway, we wouldn't have the budget to do that.
So your recommendation is to actually have the replacement of the existing job with more than one position?
Eventually, long-term, yeah,
But so the immediate one is to just replace it with a teacher?
yeah, and start to the approach so that we're approaching discipline differently.
Okay. Anything else on that? Issue? We're running out of time.
Shocker, Dr. Page.
Cut through a couple of these schools, but
Okay, so I want to move on to, if we can, quickly maybe march through some of these. Item 5, in terms of billing and revenue receipts, there was an issue last time where.
there were some missing names.
Yeah.
The actual billing and revenue is correct. It's, this is a complete list of everyone, complete list of everyone who uses our facilities. The bigger packet is Cole Avenue. The smaller packet is all of the other individual sites. So you'll see McMahon Field, you'll see the gym at Eastford Road, you'll see Charlton Street Gym. So the smaller packet is everywhere but Cole Ave. The larger packet is Cole Ave.
Okay.
So that is every single person who's
So
utilized,
these are
every
all the
single
bills,
instant.
Each individual.
Every single
instance?
instant,
Okay.
yes.
Some haven't happened yet, though.
So is there any?
Those are scheduled, yes, some are scheduled.
Or any, do we have any deficiencies? I think that was the big deal, in terms of, is anybody that's using things that aren't being billed, aren't being paid? That was the issue that came up, correct me if I'm correct?
Yep.
I think we did just receive a check from someone who hadn't paid us in a while, and we're following on that.
And
We should
that was
be
my
correct.
question, I guess. Are we sending out statements to the people that owe money?
If, to some degree it depends. when you enter into a rental agreement on, say, a house or a building, you don't typically get an invoice every time. You know you're supposed to pay monthly rent, and you pay monthly rent. You know, my mortgage company doesn't send me an invoice every month, and, you know. So we presume, and we are looking at whether we are getting everything from everyone. So, you know, I can follow up on that.
I think it would be good for next time, just to make sure that we, you know,
Yeah.
because there was a notion that there were some people that either they weren't paying, or they weren't being billed.
Yeah,
or they
no,
didn't
I
know,
honestly
or-
don't.
If
Yeah,
I may,
I'm inheriting that a little bit with the
Yeah.
director of operations no longer being here.
might make a recommendation that if we do have people, even though they're on contract, that have past due statements, I don't know if this should be applied to the policy in regards to facility use. I don't have it in front of me, but if we could look at that and see if we should change our policy in regards to collection of money,
Yes.
just to make
Honestly,
that recommendation.
yeah, I don't know what that
Because if
looks
someone
like.
has a bill that's
Yeah.
maybe, let's say,
Mhm.
$600 past due
Mhm.
since the beginning of school,
Sure.
we should be making sure we're collecting those.
Okay,
fees.
and if there's one that you're aware of, you know, let me know offline. I don't know.
Yeah, there were a couple that came up, I can't remember the details now, but.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
probably a different venue.
That was the reason for that.
Better for this, but I'm
that
happy
being-
to, you know, look at that again. I don't know all of the policy language yet. I'm kind of picking up some stuff.
All right, so item B was kind of, again, you know, review current administrative, central admin, department organizational charts, because, you know, again, here we are, budget. I don't know if you have anything that you want to sort of update, review what's happening with central office staffing.
Nothing that
With
had
regard to
changed
the-
since.
Okay.
We eliminated director of operations, that is the same position as people personnel. So that was a combined, I do know that town councilor Karaska, I believe, had an issue that was, people personnel was a separate position,
Well,
that's
it
not
was
the case.
Student affairs.
Student affairs.
Sorry,
So it's
sorry.
director-
We're still
director
keeping
of
Colleen.
Student affairs.
Yeah, we're still keeping Colleen,
And so, when
so,
somebody, you know, somebody, you can imagine, somebody
Yeah.
says, oh, you're limiting student affairs, what
Yeah.
are you doing? So-
yeah. And basically, student affairs, just so I can define that for you, what student affairs was if a student, again, had a disciplinary hearing or infraction at the building level, and they were not satisfied with the outcome of either the investigation or the disciplinary action, they could come to to student affairs and have that heard
Okay.
by that position. So it was a position that I think in the time that I was here with Director of Operations, I think we heard 2 cases at that level. Again, one of the things that we're trying to do is solve the issues at the building level, as close to the student as possible, to the school as possible. So it kind of became a position that really wasn't utilized. That position was also our Title IX position, and so now that's been reallocated.
So,
Just while we're on it with the Title IX, in regards to coming in the handbooks,
Yeah.
will those will need to be changed in
Yeah.
the handbook? Sorry, a little off topic,
No,
but.
good catch.
so the other question I have is a lot is being made of, in the restructuring proposal, about instruction.
About what?
Instruction.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things in your proposal was to eliminate the supervisor of instruction position.
Correct.
So how, and given the fact that that position has never actually been utilized, as far as I'm aware, this year, how I guess my question would be, what would have been the job description of the duties of the supervisor of instruction, and how are those, and because I'm curious, it seems to me like, that sounds like an important person.
It does, yeah.
You're supervising the instruction across the district. You're the one who's actually helping the teachers learn how to teach better.
Okay,
We didn't do that.
perfect.
We
No.
didn't do that.
Yep.
And now you're eliminating the position, so part A, I like the multi-part questions. Part A is what was done this year to fill that role?
Mhm.
And what is going to be done in the future to fill that role?
Okay, so again, in an effort to get as many resources as possible into the schools closest to instruction. For this year, the supervisor of instruction was not utilized. We have created the IRS for ELL and literacy. And so we held on filling the supervisor of instruction. And most of what the supervisor of instruction was doing was really subsumed by the assistant superintendent. So I think that we took a different approach, and that we built our expectation around our IRSs, and meeting weekly with the IRSs to really set the expectation for professional development, to set the expectation for coaching in classrooms, and so that IRSs were really doing the feet on the ground work around instruction and coaching with teachers. Now, that's not to say that we haven't had our share of issues, because we are under-resourced, so our coaches are unfortunately having to do some MCAS testing coordination, which is problematic. They're having to do some ANET testing coordination. They're having to do some AIP reporting coordination, which is problematic. So we're sort of looking at our revisions to the AIP and saying, how can we protect the IRS positions so they truly are providing the coaching that's needed for staff to really make improvements in student achievement.
Okay, so that's, I think that's, so you, that sounds to me like a very reasonable
Yeah.
thing. So I guess my question would be, and I don't know, it's probably the final question, is why not just start there for next year? Why rehaul the whole system? Why not just start with that? You know you had a deficiency in all of that this year. We were under budget crunch. We've got a risk of financial consequences with this restructuring proposal and others. Why not just start with correcting the deficiencies that you know were this year and see how they go for another year?
So I think one of the things that hasn't been brought up publicly is the fact that the middle school in particular, in speaking with staff, in reviewing the concerns out of the surveys, in talking with IRSs and department chairs, the idea of a principal that is overseeing the work of the middle school, that has been a consistent theme coming out of just about every conversation. The fact that middle school is a unique set of 3 years. And having been a middle school principal, I know that for a fact. And being able to develop the programs that support the social emotional development of a very unique grade span, and a very unique set of skills that children need to have, and balance that with all of the academic rigor that needs to be in place. That's critical at this point. And that's the major, I think, lever in changing student achievement. We seem to be at a place at the elementary schools where we understand bringing kids up to grade level and interventions and keeping them there, but by the time they're getting to middle school, they're behind. So we need to catch them up, which is problematic. And so we really need someone to lead that charge and figure out how to structure the discipline environment, the social emotional environment, and also the academic environment that supports student growth.
So I guess that's, I mean, I would agree philosophically. However, you know, in terms of, again, pragmatics, a lot of things considered, if I look at the numbers for the middle school, on the middle school side, in some areas, they're actually better than last year on that side. And particularly in tardies, suspensions, attendance, suspension days. Course failures are kind of a wash, about the same. And so, you know, to me, I guess, I wonder if you've considered, again, we're talking budget impact, right? Just why not create some kind of position that's like an associate principal that has primary academic leadership responsibilities for middle school, and just make some minor adjustments to what people do, rather than rehaul the whole district? That's my simple question.
Because I don't think that's the right thing to do.
I don't think that's the right thing to do,
No.
and that's why.
Because in organizing the district in a way that sets the systems in place and allows the right people to be doing the right work, I truly believe that having a principal at the middle school where students, parents, and staff have the leadership that is specific to that grade span is critical. I think the high school presents a significantly different set of its own issues and concerns. And if you don't separate, you will continue to have a position that is overwhelmed, that can't possibly keep up with the set of evaluations, that can't, can I
Maybe you
finish?
misunderstood. I'm sorry, maybe I
Can I
think you
finish?
Sure, but I think you
So-
misunderstood my question. So go ahead.
What was your question?
My question is, why not create or appoint or something an associate principal that has it's principal level, middle school responsibilities, rather than having to do this whole thing of just, you know, terminating a bunch of people, having them reapply, you may or may not qualify for the new job, go through all this delay. We've got a lot on our docket for next year in preparation. We're going to lose, my calculations, even aggressive timeline, you're going to lose a month and a half of curriculum development, preparation for the DESI visit in October, preparation for the NEASC accreditation. You're going to lose a lot of time just in recruiting new people. And so my question is, can we not solve this problem of having middle school principal leadership just by creating and making minor tweaks in positions?
So you can't have an associate principal. That would be an assistant principal.
It's not assistant principal. Make it
You
a, make
can't
it a principal,
have-
associate principal.
So you
Be
have to
creative.
have two principals.
Okay, that's fine. Well, then make two principals. But I don't know why you have to go through the exercise of risking destabilizing what we already have with the major, I mean, the way I read the proposal in the document is that we just need a principal at the high school and a principal at the middle school.
So if you're talking about the process
So-
and you're talking about the risk assessment of that, I think it's important that in your packets are the legal opinions and council recommendations for using a process that mitigates risk.
But there's really no, I mean, I've been in situations before, and I'm sure that a legal opinion, if you ask this question specifically, is, do you really need to terminate somebody in a position, create a new position, and then re-interview? You can do both documents in the same time. You can say, okay, we're going to, under mutual consent, we're going to terminate your job as this, we're going to add your job as this. You produce both at the same time, sign both, done. That, to me, I don't think, I'd like to see the legal opinion on why that can't be done. I mean, that's my request. Because, oh yeah, we're out of time, I think.
We are out of time,
Yep.
and we're certainly
another
beyond
meeting
the
that needs to
scope
go.
of this
Yep.
committee.
Okay. So anyway, thank you very much. And we will take up the rest of the items, I guess.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Right, yeah.
Second?
So-
We're adjourned.